November 1820. The Pacific stretches endless, a steel-blue expanse that hides both promise and peril. Nantucket, Massachusetts. The birthplace of American whaling had sent hundreds of ships to roam the oceans in pursuit of Leviathan's creatures whose very existence inspired awe and terror. The Essex, a 238-ton whaler, cut through the waves with the steady rhythm of seasoned men at the oars and sails. Her deck groaned under the weight of harpoons, barrels of oil, and men whose eyes carried the hunger for profit as much as the knowledge of danger. It was early morning, the horizon a silvered line between sky and sea. The wind whispered, carrying scents of brine fish and distant storms. Aboard the Essex, Captain George Pollard, Jr. paced the quarterdeck's eyes, scanning for spouts that would betray the presence of a sperm whale. His crew, 20 men, moved with practiced precision, the routines of harpooning etched into muscle memory, each aware that the ocean could claim them in an instant. The men were sons, brothers, husbands, bound together by necessity, trust, and fear. Fear that came not just from the vastness of the Pacific, but from the knowledge that these creatures could fight back. A whale was not a mere quarry. It was a living force, a shapeshifter of water and muscle, unpredictable, enormous, capable of bending wood and steel to its will. The Essex's mission was clear: hunt, process, and return. Oil was wealth, the lifeblood of lamps, the lubricant of industry. Nantucket's fortunes rested on the bravery or madness of men like those aboard the Essex. Each morning began with a prayer whispered under breath, a hopeful glance at the horizon, a shared glance between men who understood the stakes. Their journals spoke of hope and dread alike, entries that hinted at superstition mingled with empirical observation. Saw a whale spout near starboard bow. Heart quickened. Wondered if nature herself tests our resolve. Captain Pollard wrote in his log, the ink blotting slightly, the hand trembling, not with fear, he claimed, but with anticipation. The ship's timbers creaked under a tension that no sea chart could measure. Supplies were adequate, the water casks full, salted meat stacked in the hold. Yet a subtle anxiety threaded the crew. Whispers of omens, tales from past voyages. The kind of stories sailors tell to keep the invisible at bay. That a whale could in anger attack. Legends that seemed fanciful until that fateful day arrived. Distance from the Americas was measured not in miles but in time, weeks away from land, weeks away from rescue. The Pacific was both provider and executioner. On board, every man knew the cost of hubris. The sea could nurture and it could annihilate. And yet the allure of conquest, of mastery over nature's great leviathans, compelled men forward. They had trained for months, harpoons, sharpened lines, coiled sails, patched. Their bodies bore scars of previous hunts, each mark a testament to survival and mortality. The ship's hold smelled faintly of oil, of hope, of impending doom. Lookouts scanned for the telltale mist of a spout. The ocean's surface shimmered with deceptive calm waves rolling like gentle breaths. But beneath the muscle of a whale waited unseen, untamed, ancient. History had prepared them in part. Since 1711, Americans had hunted sperm whales, mapping patterns, learning migration routes, perfecting harpoons and tactics. By the mid-18th century, a fleet of more than 700 whalers plied the oceans. Each ship carried with it not just men, but the legacy of knowledge, ritual, and caution passed down over generations. Yet no map, no journal, no warning could fully account for the raw, visceral power of an 80-ton creature defending itself. The men understood the stakes intellectually, but until the moment arrives, knowledge is cold comfort. The Pacific, a vast cathedral of water, could turn saints into sinners, men into ghosts within a heartbeat. On that morning, November 20th, 1820, the Essex sailed with the confidence of routine, yet the weight of inevitability pressed silently. The men sang songs to pass the time, songs of home, of loves left behind, of gods who might favor the brave or the foolish. Each note carried across the wind, mingling with gull cries, the slap of waves against the hull, the rhythmic creak of timbers. And somewhere below in the deep, a consciousness older than mankind stirred, a behemoth whose spine curved like a cathedral arch, whose heart beat in sync with the pulse of the ocean itself. By noon, the horizon held the shimmer of whale spouts. Excitement rippled through the Essex. Harpoons readied, lines coiled, men braced. Every sense sharpened. The sea was no longer a backdrop. It was the stage, alive, anticipating, breathing alongside them. The air thickened with tension. A subtle shift in the swell, a shadow beneath the surface. A movement that made the seasoned harpooners pause. Stories resurfaced of whales ramming boats of crews, lost of cannibalism, and survival tales whispered in dimly lit Nantucket taverns. The Essex's crew laughed nervously, jokes to dispel fear, yet the laughter trembled. The ship rode the swells, a fragile speck upon a vast, indifferent expanse. And the ocean, eternal and patient, waited. November 1820, off the western coast of South America. The Pacific stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of shifting blues and grays, alive with currents, winds, and the whispers of unseen creatures. The Essex, a 238-ton American whaler, rode the waves with a sense of purpose born from years of experience, from the traditions of Nantucket, Massachusetts. the island that had sent hundreds of whaling vessels across the oceans chasing the leviathans of the deep. Oil was gold. Oil from the massive bodies of sperm whales powered lamps, lubricated machinery, and drove commerce across continents. This mission, like many before, it carried the weight of a livelihood of survival of pride. The men aboard were seasoned, trained in the brutal art of the hunt, yet they were men who understood deep in their bones that the ocean was a force greater than any calculation or plan. Captain George Pollard, Jr., young yet resolute, stood upon the quarterdeck, eyes scanning the horizon with the sharpness born of countless voyages. The crew, 20 strong, moved with synchronized efficiency, each man a cog in the machine of survival. Harpoons were readied, lines coiled meticulously, sails patched to perfection. The wind carried the smell of salt, of brine, of life beneath the waves, and with it the latent sense of peril that always accompanies a hunt for creatures capable of turning the hunter into the hunted. Men whispered of omens, stories of ships destroyed by vengeful leviathans, of ghostly specters, of sailors lost at sea. Some laughed nervously, others muttered prayers. All shared a common understanding: the ocean was patient and it was ruthless. The Essex had departed Nantucket months earlier, laden with provisions, charts, and the confidence of men who had survived past hunts. They had encountered whales before, massive creatures that tested strength and skill, but nothing in their experience could fully prepare them for what awaited. The journals of previous voyages had documented attacks, dismastings, capsizings, yet those were mere words on paper, the cold ink failing to convey the terror of teeth tail and sheer force of muscle meeting wood. The men knew the statistics, the probabilities, and yet as they sailed deeper into the Pacific, the numbers became meaningless in the face of the living sea. By mid-morning, the water around them shimmered with distant spouts, excitement mixed with apprehension. The crew readied themselves. A single whale could yield enough oil to make a fortune, but a single whale could also spell disaster. Stories circulated aboard ship, folklore mingled with memory, a beast rising from the depths to avenge some ancient wrong, a spirit of the ocean sent to test the courage or hubris of men. These tales were spoken in half laughter, half whisper, but they lingered in the mind like shadows in the corners of a cabin. Captain Pollard's log recorded the day with careful precision: spouts sighted near starboard bow, crew in readiness, spirits high. Yet the ocean carries whispers of danger. The ink on the page seemed to tremble as though echoing the uncertainty that clung to every man on deck. Supplies were ample salted meat stacked in the hold, water casks full, yet no abundance could protect against the fury of a leviathan defending itself. The Pacific itself seemed to respond, subtle shifts in the swell a shadow beneath the surface currents that tugged with invisible hands. The ship rocked with each wave, each creak of timber a reminder of its fragility. A lookout reported a massive shape gliding below. The men froze. Fear and awe mingled, instinct battling knowledge. This was no ordinary prey. It was an entity of immense power, intelligence, and unpredictability. Legends resurfaced of whalers driven to madness, of lifeboats dashed upon rocks, of men stranded for weeks, forced into unspeakable acts to survive. The Essex crew laughed nervously, voices tight with tension, jokes to keep the fear at bay. But even as laughter echoed across the deck, a deep silence seemed to ripple through the water, a pause in time, a prelude to calamity. The ship's timbers groaned as if in warning. The sails rippled with the breath of the ocean. The men moved in ritualized motions, lines coiled, harpoons, poised eyes scanning the waves. Every sense heightened, the smell of salt mixed with fear, the taste of brine on lips dry from wind and exertion. Each man was acutely aware that in the next moments the line between hunter and hunted could vanish. The ocean had seen this dance before countless times, creatures rising to challenge, to defend, and men daring to claim dominion, discovering the limits of their strength. The Essex sailed confidently, yet with an unspoken reverence. The men knew that the sea gave and the sea took, and that this day, November 20th, 1820, would be remembered. Beyond the practicalities, sails, harpoons, provisions, the atmosphere was laden with superstition. Stories of whales that bore the spirits of the dead. Omens read in the flight of birds, in the shimmer of spouts, in the angle of sunlight on the waves. The crew, practical men trained in science and skill, nevertheless acknowledged a truth older than their charts. The sea was alive, sentient perhaps, and what stirred beneath could not be predicted. And so the Essex pressed onward, the horizon stretching infinitely. Every movement, every breath measured against the uncertainty of the deep. Every man understood that courage alone might not suffice, that survival required both skill and perhaps a touch of fortune. The stage was set, the ocean waited, and the Leviathan stirred. The day had begun like any other in the Pacific. November 20th, 1820. The sun hung low, glinting across endless waves, painting silver streaks on the restless water. The Essex moved steadily, sails taut, deck bustling with men, eyes scanning for spouts, ears attuned to the whisper of the wind. Then a shadow emerged beneath the swells, subtle at first, a ripple against the natural rhythm of the ocean. A presence massive, deliberate, ancient. The men paused, the creak of the deck beneath their boots, a fragile reminder of mortality. Captain Pollard squinted, recognizing the shape from experience. A sperm whale, immense, a colossus of the deep. perhaps 80 tons of muscle, bone, and will moving with the silence of predators that had roamed the oceans long before man walked the earth. And then it struck. The first blow was sudden, a crash of force against the timbers. The Essex shuddered violently, a groan of stressed wood filling the air, mingling with the startled cries of men. Water splashed over the deck, salt-stinging eyes and mouths. The whale had rammed the ship with the fury of a living hurricane. Sailors stumbled, harpoons slipping from calloused hands. Some fell to the deck, bodies, bruised breath knocked out by sheer impact. The ocean roared in response, waves tossing the vessel like a toy. Time seemed suspended. A heartbeat stretched into eternity. A second strike followed, deliberate, precise. The whale, sensing threat or affront, drove its massive head into the hull, wood-splintering ropes snapping. Men were thrown against each other, some overboard. Screams mixed with the roar of the wind, the slap of waves, the panicked shouts of a crew suddenly tiny against the immensity of nature. Captain Pollard shouted orders, his voice carrying over the chaos, but words could not match the raw power pressing against every plank, every rope, every man's resolve. In minutes, the Essex began to list. Water poured in, filling the hold, extinguishing lamps, drenching every man with icy brine. A collective understanding passed silently among the crew: their ship was lost. And yet, survival demanded action. 3 whaleboats were lowered into the frothing, unforgiving water. 20 men crowded into the small craft's limbs, aching hearts, hammering eyes wide with disbelief and terror. They pushed off from the splintering remains, rowing into a sea that seemed to stretch infinitely. The initial hours were mercifully calm, a deceptive lull. The men huddled together, shivering from the cold, damp, and shock. The whale had disappeared beneath the waves, leaving only the memory of its assault, the echo of splintered wood, and a tangible sense of dread. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, but it was fear that devoured their minds first. Every sound, gulls crying overhead, waves slapping the hull, creaking of oars, was amplified. Shadows beneath the water seemed alive. Whispers of old tales flitted across memory, leviathans that returned to haunt those who wronged them. Spirits of the deep that demanded tribute, vengeance, sacrifice. Days passed, or perhaps weeks. Time blurred under the relentless sun and stormy nights. Water was rationed, supplies counted obsessively. Salted meat quickly grew tiresome, the tongue dry, the stomach hollow. Sleep came fitfully, dreams haunted by the image of the whale, the broken ship, the faces of friends lost to the waves. And then came the unthinkable. Hunger pressing beyond endurance, decisions that no man wished to contemplate. The crew drew lots, a method grim yet impartial. Those chosen were sacrificed, consumed by their comrades to keep the others alive. Eyes averted, prayers, muttered, tears shed silently. Humanity reduced to its rawest form. The line between moral and necessary, between life and death, dissolved in the sun-scorched Pacific. On one boat the tension was palpable. Men whispering, plotting, praying. A single mistake could doom them all. Yet courage endured, the stubborn spark of survival pushing them to navigate by sun, by stars, by instinct alone. 3 small vessels adrift on the vast blue desert became entire worlds. Every decision mattered. Every motion could mean life or death. The sea itself seemed sentient. Calm waters could conceal sudden fury. Clouds could unleash storms without warning. Currents could sweep a boat into oblivion. And yet the men rowed on, ever vigilant eyes scanning for the next spout, the next sign of danger, the next glimmer of hope. Captain Pollard's log, later recovered, would read, "No measure of man's craft can match the caprice of the ocean. Yet we endure, by wit, by courage, by necessity." Even as their physical struggle dominated, folklore lingered in their consciousness. The whale that had attacked them, was it merely a creature defending its life? Or was it something more? A spectral guardian of the deep, a leviathan of vengeance, a harbinger of doom. Tales from other whalers surfaced in memory ships, destroyed without warning. Men stranded for weeks, madness creeping aboard silently. Each man's mind teetered on the edge, the boundary between reality and superstition blurred by exhaustion and fear. Occasionally they glimpsed land in the distance, a mirage or a promise. Relief flickered only to vanish as the horizon revealed itself as endless waves. Survival became ritual. Rowing in unison, praying in unison, rationing supplies, meticulously recording each day as a victory over fate. Yet in every heart the shadow of what had happened aboard the Essex remained. The whale's power, its singular intelligence, its ability to reduce men to mere prey, etched into memory, becoming legend. Some men would later recount moments of strange phenomena. A flash beneath the water that seemed to follow their boat. A shadow in the clouds that mimicked the whale's form. A whisper in the wind carrying voices of the lost. Was it grief, imagination, or the ocean itself exacting tribute? The boundary was unknowable, reality and myth intertwined. After 83 days, only 5 survived. Emaciated, shell-shocked, forever haunted by what they had endured. 3 others were stranded on a Pacific island, later rescued. The remainder had succumbed to hunger exposure and the inexorable pressure of a world they could not control. Yet, even in their suffering, tales emerged. Journals smuggled on lifeboats, whispered accounts, logbooks recovered decades later. The Essex had become more than a ship. It was a narrative of human endurance, a testament to the ocean's might, a story that would ripple across time. Herman Melville would later draw from this terror, from this profound confrontation with nature, life and death. Moby Dick would immortalize the fear, the awe, the singular confrontation between man and Leviathan. But for those who survived the Essex, no book could fully capture the living horror, the moral ambiguity, the weight of survival. Each man carried within him the ocean, the whale, the shadow of those lost, and the whisper of legends that would never die. The days stretched into weeks. The survivors clung to the fragile lifeboats, muscles sore, skin burnt and salted by sun and brine. The Pacific seemed endless, a shifting desert of water under the merciless sun. Hunger gnawed relentlessly, turning thought into obsession, morality into question. Each ration of water, each scrap of preserved meat became a precious fragment of life. Yet the shadow of the whale lingered, a specter in memory, a presence beneath every wave. The men could not forget. Even when the ocean appeared calm, it carried the echo of its fury. Rescue was uncertain. The charts they carried were mere approximations, the stars a fickle guide when clouds obscured their light. Currents conspired to carry them further from land, and the wind often mocked their efforts. Small islands appeared on the horizon like mirages, only to vanish as they drew near. Each sighting sparked hope, then despair. A constant rhythm of fear, fatigue, and fleeting relief. They kept records. Captain Pollard, Thomas Nickerson, and a few others wrote in stolen moments, ink-diluted pages crumpled by water and sweat, every entry a testament to human perseverance, every sentence a struggle to impose order on chaos. They documented what could be remembered, what could be endured, and the things that could not. The unimaginable had occurred. Men, once companions, now reduced to acts of necessity beyond comprehension. Cannibalism, a word that no man wishes to speak aloud, became survival. Lots were drawn, names chosen, prayers whispered. The dead fed the living. Each act weighed upon the soul an indelible mark. They became witnesses and participants in a reality harsher than any story. Folklore had spoken of the deep, exacting tribute. Superstition had warned. Yet it was necessity, not myth, that demanded payment. Eventually the survivors reached the fringes of civilization, the coastline of South America. Weathered, starved, yet alive. Ships appeared on the horizon. Strangers offered aid. The men, gaunt and silent, were pulled from the water, clothed, fed, and given passage home. Yet their journey did not end with rescue. The trauma lingered, a spectral companion. Every wave, every gust of wind recalled the shadow of that whale, the splintered timbers of the Essex, the faces of comrades lost to the sea. 3 men set adrift on a small Pacific island during the ordeal were later found survivors of a microcosm of horror. Together the few who lived returned to Nantucket, changed, irrevocably. Their testimony would form the foundation of legends. The Essex became a cautionary tale, a touchstone for sailors, a ghost story whispered in taverns and aboard ships. The whale never named became larger than life, a creature whose intelligence, power, and vengeance defied comprehension. Yet history did not merely preserve terror. It recorded triumph. The men had endured. Their survival spoke to resilience, to human cunning and fortitude in the face of forces beyond imagination. Newspapers reported the events. The Essex lost to the sea by the assault of a sperm whale. The story circulated, shocking readers, inspiring awe, a narrative bridging fact and legend. Logbooks, journals, and oral testimony preserved the horror for posterity. Names were remembered, dates recorded, lessons passed to future generations of whalers. And yet the story transcended mere survival. Herman Melville, years later, would read the accounts, Thomas Nickerson's journal, Captain Pollard's testimony, the narrative of Essex etched into the consciousness of a writer attuned to the poetry and terror of the sea. Moby Dick would emerge, immortalizing not only a whale but the dread, the hubris, and the fragility of man. Through fiction, the Essex lived again. Its shadow a warning, a monument to those lost, a lens into the human soul confronting the incomprehensible. Legends intertwined with reality. Sailors spoke of the whale as more than a creature, a spirit, a guardian of the deep, a force balancing life and death. Some claimed to feel its presence in the swell of the ocean, in the pattern of waves, in the haunting loneliness of the sea. Myth and memory blended. Fact and folklore danced together. The Essex, the whale, the men all became symbols of survival, of horror, of awe. Modern historians still reference the event. The Essex is studied in maritime history and survival studies in literary analysis. Maps mark its last known coordinates, logbooks preserved in archives. The whale's attack is analyzed, its behavior force possible reasons, yet speculation cannot diminish the terror endured. Psychology, physiology, and meteorology explain some outcomes, but the raw lived experience transcends analysis. What is known is tempered by what is remembered, and what is remembered is never entirely rational. Every retelling, every journal, every scholarly article adds another layer. The story grows. The whale becomes mythic, the crew heroic and tragic. The Atlantic and Pacific become stages for human confrontation with the sublime. Those 83 days at sea, the choices made, the horrors endured, they echo through time. A reminder of the fine line between mastery and helplessness, between life and death, between man and nature. And so the Essex remains, a ship lost, a tale immortal, a catalyst for literature and legend. The whale never fully understood, lives on in memory and imagination. Survival, sacrifice, the confrontation with the sublime, all preserved in story, in journal, in folklore. Humanity's audacity, the ocean's indifference, the power of a creature unseen yet felt. As the survivors returned, their lives forever shadowed by the ordeal, whispers of superstition persisted. Some spoke of a whale that haunted dreams, appearing in storms, in the shimmer of spouts and the echo of breaking waves. Tales of vengeful leviathans passed from sailor to sailor, growing in detail, in dread, in significance. Essex's story, fact entwined with legend, became a benchmark for understanding the thin veil between human courage and the overwhelming forces of the natural world. The Essex had perished, yet it lived in memory, in journals, in folklore, in literature. Its shadow stretched across oceans and decades. A single whale, 80 tons of muscle and will, had tested man, and man had endured. But the cost was etched in every survivor's eyes, in every whispered story. In the conscience of humanity confronting the vast, indifferent sea. The Pacific stretched endlessly, an ocean of infinite blue. Yet for the men of the Essex, it had become a stage of relentless torment. Each day blurred into the next, the sun relentless, the nights cold and starless. The 3 whaleboats drifted like fragile shells, holding men whose eyes carried the ghosts of companions lost to the sea, to hunger, to fate. The air reeked of salt sweat and the lingering scent of mortality. Conversation was sparse, each word weighed with gravity. The men spoke in whispers, murmurs to preserve sanity, murmurs that sometimes betrayed fear deeper than they dared admit. Rations had long run dry. The salted meat consumed, the water reduced to a trickle. Desperation gnawed at reason. Decisions that would have been unimaginable on shore became necessary. Cannibalism, the unthinkable, had already claimed its first victims, lots drawn to decide who would feed the rest. A cruel lottery imposed by the indifferent ocean. Each draw a test of morality, of survival, of manhood. Eyes averted, hands trembling. Prayers whispered under breath. Some clung to God, others cursed the sea, and some stared blankly, numb to all. The whale, the colossal leviathan that had destroyed their ship. Its presence lingered, not always seen but felt. A shadow beneath the water, a ripple where none should be. Men swore they heard it exhale, felt its gaze in the swell of the waves. Folklore merged with reality. Spirits of the deep, vengeful leviathans, harbingers of doom. Some claimed to glimpse a phantom shape swimming alongside the boats, following, observing. Was it memory, hallucination, or the ocean itself exacting judgment? The distinction blurred with every passing day. Storms arrived without warning. Sheets of rain lashed the men's salt and freshwater mingling, eyes stinging, mouths dry. Waves towered above them, towering walls of liquid crashing, swallowing hope. The boats bucked, nearly capsized. Each man gripped the oars, the edge of exhaustion pressing against reason. Shouts became screams. Some drowned in panic, others frozen by shock. Time slowed, each moment stretching into eternity. Survival became ritualized. Row, pray, ration record. Row, pray, ration record. The rhythm of existence reduced to a mechanical cadence, a fragile grasp on life. Conflicts arose. Minds frayed. Men turned on one another over scarce water, over scraps of food, over accusations, whispered in fear. The authority of Captain Pollard strained under the weight of human desperation. Orders shouted across the waves, often ignored, sometimes obeyed. Discipline and hierarchy became tenuous concepts. Survival demanded adaptability, cunning resolve. Morality became malleable, shaped by necessity. The very fabric of humanity was tested. Night brought its own horrors, darkness swallowing all horizons. The waves became invisible predators, each sound amplified, each shadow distorted. The creak of timber, the slap of water, the groan of a fellow survivor, all became instruments of terror. Sleep came only briefly, if at all, dreams haunted by the whale, by the ship breaking, by the men who had been lost. Nightmares merged with memory. Some woke screaming, others silent, eyes wide trembling. Yet amidst the horror, glimmers of courage and ingenuity emerged. Men crafted rudimentary sails, repaired oars, improvised fishing lines. Small victories against nature's indifference. Each catch of a fish, each collected drop of rainwater, each successful navigation toward land, all became monumental triumphs. The men's bodies were ravaged by sun salt and hunger, but their spirits clung to life, stubborn, fragile, defiant. The journals they kept became lifelines. Pollard's log, Thomas Nickerson's diary, scattered notes preserved in tin boxes or hidden beneath clothing. They documented not only coordinates and ration counts, but thoughts, fears, and moral quandaries. Words became vessels for sanity, for posterity, for memory. Yet even these records bore the weight of omission. Moments too dark, acts too harrowing to record fully, pages blank where horror could not be inscribed. Fact intertwined with folklore, reality with interpretation. The whale's shadow haunted them. In moments of calm, the men swore they saw it gliding beneath the boats, following, waiting. The very sea seemed aware, responsive. A sentient force punishing or testing, indifferent to human suffering. Superstition born of fear and memory colored their perception. Some swore that the Leviathan communicated through the waves, that its attacks were not mindless but deliberate, a judgment upon hubris. At one point they sighted an island, a tiny, unremarkable rise of sand and rock, yet to them it was a beacon of salvation. Rowing toward it consumed every ounce of remaining strength. Hope surged, only to be tempered by the realization that reaching land did not guarantee safety. Predators, scarcity, exposure all awaited. The struggle continued day by day, hour by hour. Each breath of victory, each step ashore a reprieve from the relentless sea. Even as they neared rescue, the ordeal was not over. 3 men were abandoned temporarily on a Pacific island, left to endure isolation until a passing vessel could retrieve them. Their survival depended on ingenuity, resilience, and sheer luck. Meanwhile, those at sea faced relentless waves, wind, and the omnipresent shadow of the whale. The ocean had not yet relinquished its grip. When finally rescued, the survivors were transformed. Bodies wasted, minds scarred. Yet their testimony became legend. Newspapers reported the Essex's destruction, the whale's unprecedented attack. Scholars, sailors, and storytellers preserved the details. The event blurred lines between fact and folklore. The whale became a symbol, an immortal force, a cautionary tale of human ambition and the power of nature. Herman Melville would later encounter these accounts, the journals of Thomas Nickerson, the testimonies of Captain Pollard. And from these fragments, Moby Dick was born. The narrative of Essex became the backbone of literary exploration into obsession, nature, revenge, and mortality. Fact and fiction intertwined. The whale, once real, became eternal in imagination. Yet even as Melville wrote, the true horror remained with those who lived it. Nights haunted by memory, days shadowed by what they had endured. Each wave a reminder, each spout a specter. Folklore and reality inseparable. The Essex's story continued in whispers and journals and lessons for sailors and literature. The human struggle, the confrontation with the sublime, the test of morality under extreme duress. All preserved in narrative, all echoing across the oceans and through time. Rescue arrived like a distant promise finally fulfilled. Ships appeared on the horizon, hulls glinting under the harsh sun, sails taut against the wind. The men of the Essex, emaciated, sunburned eyes haunted by weeks of survival at the mercy of sea and beast, struggled to comprehend that the ordeal might be over. Hands cramped from rowing, backs raw from exposure, bodies weakened by hunger. Each breath was a triumph, each step toward rescue, a reclamation of humanity. Yet the mind remained captive. Memories etched indelibly, the crash of timbers, the cold salt water, the faces of companions lost. Thomas Nickerson, youngest among the crew, later recounted the moments in his journal. The relief of seeing another ship, the disbelief that life continued beyond the ocean's cruelty. Every sound was amplified. The creak of the rigging, the slap of water against hull, the shouts of sailors approaching. Each sensory detail an anchor pulling him back from the edge of memory, yet also reminding him of what had transpired. The survivors were lifted aboard, clothed, fed, given fresh water, yet salvation did not immediately cleanse the trauma. 3 men left on a small, uninhabited Pacific island during the journey were later found by passing vessels. Their survival was a testament to ingenuity and resilience. Rainwater collected in leaves, coconuts split for sustenance, makeshift shelters crafted from driftwood. The human will pressed into service against the relentless demands of nature. Each man emerged physically intact, yet mentally burdened by the memories of the ocean, the whale, and the decisions they had been forced to make. The narrative of Essex became immediate legend. Newspapers across the United States reported the events with a mixture of horror and fascination. The Essex lost to a vengeful whale. Read the headlines. Crew survives by extraordinary measures. Accounts varied. Exaggeration mingled with truth, fact entangled with the ghostly echoes of sailors' tales. The whale itself, unnamed, became mythic, a symbol of the power of nature, a specter in maritime imagination. The crew's journals, some preserved, others lost to time, offered stark insight into survival, meticulous records of days at sea, rationing, and navigation. Yet interspersed were entries that revealed terror, doubt, and moral compromise, names, dates, actions, interwoven with superstition, with whispers of a leviathan that was more than animal. Some men wrote of seeing shadows beneath the boat, of hearing breath in the waves. The boundaries of reality and folklore blurred, each perception shaped by exhaustion and trauma. Captain Pollard returned to Nantucket, a man physically whole but forever changed. His command had endured both ocean and leviathan, yet the human cost weighed heavily. He faced scrutiny and sympathy, praise and incredulity. The Essex had perished, yet its story had transcended the vessel itself. The ocean had claimed the ship, yet memory preserved it. The names of the crew, the dates of loss, the moments of horror, immortalized in journals, letters, and oral tradition. The literary impact would arrive decades later. Herman Melville, inspired by accounts of the Essex, would craft Moby Dick. The narrative transformed the real-life Leviathan into a symbol, obsession, vengeance, the incomprehensible power of nature. Fact merged with fiction. The whale became eternal, the struggle of the Essex's crew mythic. Readers of Melville would never know the true names of the men, yet they would feel the pulse of terror, courage, and despair. The literary world absorbed their ordeal, translating human suffering into art. Maritime historians still reference the Essex. Coordinates of the final voyage, recorded logs, studied survival strategies, analyzed. The attack of the 80-ton sperm whale remains a case study in the limits of human endeavor against nature. Psychology, oceanography, and maritime survival science examine the event, yet no calculation captures the lived terror. The interplay of fact and folklore continues. The whale, a creature of legend and history alike. Folklore evolved alongside fact. Sailors recounted tales of vengeful leviathans, shadows gliding beneath boats, apparitions in the swell, whispers carried on the wind. The Essex became a benchmark for understanding human endurance, a parable of hubris and humility before the ocean. Each retelling emphasized different truths: courage, desperation, morality, or the sheer indifferent might of a creature from the deep. The legacy extended beyond literature and folklore. Whaling practices were examined, survival protocols refined, safety equipment improved. The Essex's tragedy became a reference point, a cautionary tale for all who ventured upon the sea. Names were remembered, journals preserved, and the story was taught to new generations of sailors and maritime enthusiasts. Yet always the shadow of the whale lingered, a reminder of limits, of fear, of respect owed to forces beyond comprehension. Even in modern retellings, the Essex inspires awe and horror. Documentaries, scholarly articles, and museum exhibits reconstruct the voyage, highlight the human struggle, and honor the memories of those who perished. The whale's attack is analyzed: kinetic energy, estimated mass, behavioral patterns. Yet these technicalities cannot fully convey the terror, the immediacy of force, the helplessness, the moral weight of survival choices. The story resonates because it is human, visceral, and eternal, and in every retelling the line between reality and legend blurs, fact and folklore entwine. The whale exists simultaneously as flesh and myth, as force and spirit. The Essex's crew live in memory, in literature, in maritime tradition. Survival, sacrifice, fear, ingenuity, all preserved in story. Each generation that reads, watches, or studies the Essex feels the pulse of that November day in 1820, feels the ocean's breath, hears the echo of splintered timbers, sees the shadow beneath the waves. Ultimately, the Essex teaches that heroism is not the absence of fear but the confrontation with it, that survival often demands acts beyond moral comfort, that nature's power dwarfs human ambition, that memory preserves more than facts, it preserves emotion, horror, and awe. The men who survived carried the legacy forward. The lost remained honored in silence, and the whale, forever unseen, remains eternal in the imagination. The Pacific stretches endlessly, a mirror of sky and cloud waves glinting like shattered silver. Yet beneath this serene expanse lies memory, and memory is a weight heavier than water. The Essex is gone. The whale vanished beneath the endless blue. But the story persists. Echoes of timbers breaking, of harpoons drawn, of men staring into the abyss, linger in the mind, in the sea, in folklore, in literature. The survivors return to land, faces etched with terror, bodies weakened by salt and sun mines, carrying the unshakable imprint of the deep. They told their tale. Journals preserved, testimonies recounted. Yet even as history recorded events, questions remained. How much of what they remembered was truth, and how much had been colored by fear, by exhaustion, by the whisper of the ocean? Some spoke of shadows beneath the boats of a whale that seemed to follow, of strange phenomena, omens of consciousness beyond comprehension. The line between fact and legend blurred, and perhaps that is how it should be. The whale became more than a creature. It became a motif, a symbol of nature's unfathomable power, of human fragility, of the thin margin between survival and oblivion. Melville would later draw inspiration from these events, weaving fiction and fact into Moby Dick. Yet even the pages of literature cannot fully contain what was lived, cannot convey the raw terror of men adrift, the ethical weight of survival, the haunting presence of a leviathan that tested not only bodies but souls. Generations of sailors learned the tale, whispered it in taverns, repeated it in classrooms, remembered it in the creak of their own ship's timbers. The story transcended Essex itself. The whale, immortalized in imagination, persisted as a warning that the sea is both giver and taker, that courage alone cannot guarantee safety, that some forces are beyond human mastery, and still questions linger. What did the men truly see beneath the waves? The shadow that followed them, the phantom of the whale that some claimed breathed alongside the lifeboats. Was it memory hallucination or something more? A consciousness of the deep watching, waiting, ensuring that the tale of Essex would never fade. The ocean remains vast, its depths unexplored, its inhabitants unknowable. The legend of that November day endures. The crew who survived carried the story for the rest of their lives. Some spoke in whispers, haunted by the choices they had made, the acts they were forced to commit, the friends lost to the merciless ocean. Every ripple, every spout, every shadow in the waves recalled that single defining encounter, and the moral ambiguities of survival. Today, the Essex is more than history. It is caution, it is legend, it is literature. It is a mirror for humanity's confrontation with the sublime, with forces too vast, too intelligent, too relentless. The whale remains unseen, yet its presence is felt. In every retelling, every analysis, every shadow of imagination. Fact and folklore entwined. Life and legend inseparable. And so we leave the story here. The ocean still calls. The waves whisper. The Leviathan waits. Perhaps it watches still patient, eternal, a force indifferent to human ambition. Its shadow beneath the water reminds us that some mysteries are meant not to be solved. Some horrors once lived are never forgotten. What would you have done? Adrift for weeks, surrounded by water and death, facing choices that defy morality, seeing the shadow of a Leviathan beneath the waves. Would courage have been enough, or would you have surrendered to fear, to hunger, to the relentless pull of the sea? You have just heard a story from history, a tale that is at once fact and legend, survival and horror, reality and myth. The Essex, the whale, the men. They remain eternal, waiting in memory and imagination in the uncharted waters of the Pacific. And perhaps that is the true legacy. Not the ship, not the whale, not even the journals, but the haunting question that follows every story of human endurance. You've just witnessed a case from history that never truly closed, a story that continues to breathe beneath the waves. Follow us to explore the next hidden tale, where fact meets folklore, where survival confronts the sublime, and where the echoes of the past still reach out across the ocean.